the entire world is being told directly by the Zionist entity that you are inferior to us, not just the Arabs, all of you.
They don't just want someone screaming out Free Palestine, they want a different take. Every month, somehow, it just gets worse. We always think, it can't get any worse than what it is now, but it just gets worse. No one is safe right now. No one is safe. Palestine will be free. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. That's all. We need to remember that the end goal is something that we will reach.
Now the narrative has changed. That's changed completely. Everyone is getting on board saying, we see that in order to make change at a political level, we have to have a voice at a political level. Otherwise we don't. We don't make change and we don't see change. Welcome to the Diet Doctor podcast, where we discuss the science of nutrition and high performance, offering practical tools for everyday life. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to another episode of the Diet Doctor podcast. Now, the theme that we discuss in this podcast is always health, well-being, nutrition. However, our health has been greatly affected by the distressing situation overseas, the situation abroad. And because we are all living vicariously through it, through social media, it has taken a profound impact not just on our physiological well-being, but also on our cognitive well-being. And with me today, I have a guest. This guest's name is Abu Bakr Rafiq, and he's 23 years of age. And at such a young age, he has been the backbone for a lot of organizations and the first person to put his hand up to stand up for what's right, whether it be Stand for Palestine, whether it be SUMSA, and spent a whole 44 days at the encampment at Sydney University, raising awareness about what's going on overseas and not wavering, not succumbing to any of the pathetic deals that were put forward to them, and only settled for what was right. Jazakallah khairan for coming on. Abu Bakr, Allah barik feek. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I touched on, first of all, the fact that we're living, vicariously through the images on social media. And most recently they have become, we never thought in a million years that things could get even worse. And it appears that they have. Unimaginable. How has that affected you physically? Because you're a voice for a lot of these organizations. I know your background is social media and marketing with Think Studios. However, how are you feeling?
Well, with what's unfolding in Gaza right now, especially, if we look in the past year, every month, somehow, it just gets worse. We always think, it can't get any worse than what it is now, but it just gets worse. And it's very difficult to kind of wrap your mind around that, especially when we see a lot of the extremely graphic content coming out of Gaza. Just the other day, I saw a video where a lady was running outside of a tent that had caught on fire after an airstrike. And she is lit up in flames, running, trying to find some water or some blanket to cover her. So it's difficult, but it kind of puts us in a situation where we remember why we are doing this. Sometimes we fall into this loop of, I'm shouting, I'm sharing, I'm doing whatever I can, but what is it all for? And then when we see these images coming out of Palestine, when we see these gruesome videos, it puts everything into perspective.
It reminds you that this is what it's about.
Exactly.
Because we've all felt that state of despair, which is antithetical to, the ideology of Islam. It's antithetical to our tradition. However, it's very hard not to feel that state of despair, even on the way here. And I'm trying to hold back tears, even just thinking about it. As I was looking at the One Path page, I saw a pregnant woman who'd just been shot, and the paramedics were carrying her. She was rushing to give birth, and she had been, I don't know if it was sniped, but she was being carried off by paramedics to get treated. She looked like she was passing unconscious. With everything that's going on, I know for the first 6 months, even the first 9 months, we were forgetting to eat sometimes, and then it was affecting and debilitating our ability to even be proponents of what's right. Have you gotten a handle of that?
I would like to think I have. I think for the most part, I kind of do have this balance, which I don't like the word balance. It's almost as if we're living our life and a genocide is taking place. You know, how do we find that balance? I don't like the word balance, but I feel like I have. But there are definitely those days where it just, you know, hits me so hard where I physically feel sick. And I'm like, what is this world that we're living in? I find avoiding looking at graphic content to be helpful because our bodies aren't designed to look at that. Our bodies are not designed to process information of a person being lit on fire or a person missing an arm and there's blood all over. Our bodies aren't created like that. Exactly. So when someone is exposed to that content constantly, you kind of become desensitized. So I try to avoid it, but obviously sometimes you just stumble across it and it kind of sets you in that, this is why we're fighting the fight. So, yeah.
I found myself in a similar position, and in the beginning I would say, no, I have to look at this content because I have to feel what they are feeling. I have to at least be able to empathize. The Prophet ﷺ was the best at putting himself in the shoes of the other, and empathy is a dominant theme in Islam. But then not just my physiological functioning, but cognitive functioning I wasn't listening to conversations. I'd struggle to pay attention when my family was talking to me, struggle to pay attention to people who are sick that I'm trying to help from a nutrition perspective. And it was very, very debilitating. And that's why we go to these rallies, we go to these encampments, but the mental toll that it was taking was profound. Did you find that it was more of a cognitive or a physical effect?
Definitely physical for me. Like that's how just my body is. When I have anxiety, it's physical anxiety. Like I feel like throwing up, when these photos that come out and these videos come out, it's distressing mentally, but I physically feel sick to my stomach. Sometimes I've just been days where I just like haven't eaten all day because I physically can't. But at the same time, you have to remember, this body is an amana. The body has rights over us. And it's about this delves into a bigger conversation of being proactive instead of reactive, right? Because sometimes we put 100% of effort to the Palestinian cause, and then after a few weeks we burn out. And it's because of things like this. We see these videos, we see these photos, and our physical response is just to shut down. So it's, striking that quote unquote balance, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you experience anger and you're standing, to sit down. If you're still upset, to lie down, because the effects are of a ripple nature, and they carry over for the entire duration of the day. And now neurological studies tell us that if you allow yourself to explode in anger, let's say whether it's a road rage incident or whatnot, it can take 7, even 8 hours for your body to go back to homeostasis, for your central nervous system to go back to its baseline, for your immune system to settle down, for your gastrointestinal system to settle down. So it can have a profound impact, which is why I felt the need for this conversation, because the rallies and everything else, they're fantastic and they do a great job. However, they are emotionally very taxing because you're surrounded by people who are all upset, and that feeling that you're experiencing becomes extremely magnified. And now we know that whether you experience, looking at these images or listening to conversations about what's going on overseas, it does have almost, I wouldn't call it a placebo because there's nothing placebo about it, but it does have an effect on your physiology because the brain, the heart, the stomach, they all work as one. The most recent tragedies that have occurred, and they're all tragedies over the last, I'd say, the last week or two. What is going on now? What is the latest that is going on right now?
So
United Nations employees are being targeted in Lebanon, for instance.
No one is safe right now. No one is safe. As I said, like at the start, you think you've reached like another level of low, but it just somehow gets worse. We just saw I think the most horrific images of Sha'ban, a 19-year-old who was hooked up to an IV drip, hand in the air, engulfed in flames. And the people around him simply can't do anything but watch because the flames were so intense that they can't go anywhere near. Water is so hard to come across right now, so trying to extinguish that fire is, virtually impossible. So they're watching people who are sick already being burnt alive. And Sha'ban, just the week prior to that, narrowly missed a missile that was launched at a mosque in Gaza.
I didn't know that.
So it's insane to think about how every living second could be the last second for the Palestinians. We see these journalists, especially like Bisan, who's become very, very popular in the past year, and her work with Al Jazeera as well has become quite renowned, where she starts her video saying, this is Bisan and I'm still alive. And she says, somehow I'm still alive. And it's just, I'm lost for words. Truly, I'm lost for words at how the Zionist entity could be so barbaric in nature. Someone could just launch a missile, but instead they choose to wait until 12 a.m. when everyone's sleeping to launch the missile. This is strategic. This is warfare on another level because it's not just physical, it's psychological. If Israel was to disappear right now and Palestine would be free right now, the Palestinians will still be occupied for generations to come. And because their minds are occupied, the generational trauma that's going to come from this is going to be insane. I think I was reading an article where they said it would take approximately 60 years to rebuild Gaza to where it was. 60 years.
That's probably with an unlimited budget too.
Yeah.
That's a hypothetical.
Exactly.
That
60
there is
years
money.
is insane to rebuild an entire city, but
So not even our kids will get to see what it once was.
It's truly insane.
Now, we're here and people feel debilitated even standing next to people like Sha'ban and still can't help. So we're all the way in Australia. We can't help, but you would think that the people nearby can help. But they're in a position where they are also in a state of despair, probably a lot more magnified than what we are feeling. The psychological warfare, we saw that witnessed with the explosion of the beepers, the walkie-talkies in Lebanon. That was another example of psychological warfare. Now, some celebrated that, thinking that was targeting soldiers. However, I saw a video with my own eyes where one of those so-called soldiers was at a checkout in a grocery store and people around him were hurt. Children were getting injured and killed as a result. How are the organizations that you are maybe not a part of, but aligned with, how are they juggling the information and the devastating content that's coming out of now both Gaza, Palestine, and Lebanon? How are they juggling the two? And is one taking precedence over another, you think?
I think it's setting intention is very, very important. Why are these organizations that exist, why do they exist, right? Why are they pushing out content? I think that's the fundamental thing that we need to look at here. For example, Stand for Palestine, they do some phenomenal work. And their intention is to not only change the narrative, but provide a voice to many people who are voiceless. And they do a fantastic job at that. They've gauged 30,000 followers or something like that. When you look at, for example, One Path Network, also doing some incredible work.
Amazing work.
They've been able to, I think in the past year, create all the content combined has over 50 million views on Palestine, on the Palestinian issue. So I think having the intention is very, very important. But if you're talking about, Lebanon and Palestine and, who takes priority and things like that, it's all the same struggle, I feel, Unfortunately, Palestine and Lebanon aren't the only people who are struggling here. When we look at Bangladesh, when we look at China,
Sudan,
right? It's Sudan. You look at all
Even
these
Syria.
countries, exactly. The Muslim world is suffering. And I find it quite strange. This is a little bit off topic. How in China, they voted for a ceasefire, right? And they voted to recognize Palestine, and they voted to do all this stuff. And I'm like, you guys are committing a genocide yourself. 3 million Uyghurs in concentration camps. That is genocide right there.
Correct. Yeah, 3 million people.
The brass neck that you have to say we're going to recognize Palestine and there needs to be a ceasefire and no more violence. I'm like, that's the audacity.
It's like when the academics in the United States said you want to free the people in Afghanistan, yet you can't fix the homeless issue in Detroit.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense. We are very far away being in Australia. What is often troubling for me it's a battle. It's like you're burning the candle at both ends almost, because we are in a country that is very blessed. Alhamdulillah. We have shelter, we have food, we have more than we deserve. We have an abundance of blessings, but it's troubling that the powers that be, where we are just not doing enough when it comes to this issue. And not only not doing enough, but participating in the propaganda machine from a media perspective. I remember that when we were at the encampment once together, where I think there was a journalist in the distance who was just looking for a way to spin this in a different direction. And you guys stuck staunch, as they say. And there were so many groups that ended up packing up and leaving when they struck a deal when the university put pressure, except the Muslim encampment. They stayed and they stayed until they got what they were after. And they did, and they succeeded in that realm. That's the sort of attitude you're saying that we need to adopt in order to progress and move forward. But how do we change things at the upper echelon here where we are?
Look, it's a tough question. There's so much grassroots activism that exists, and when we're talking about media and especially fantasy media, they've lost the narrative. Israel has lost the narrative. There is no way on God's gracious earth that Israel is somehow going to win the people's vote.
No,
it's impossible.
Statistically, it was 70%, I remember, in favor of Palestine in October 7. And then 7 days after that, it was 85. And then 7 days after that, so by October 21, it was 98.
Yeah, exactly. It's literally impossible. There's no returning from that. So I think we will see the results in the long term. But it goes back to that constant thing I'm always saying to people is we have to be proactive. We can't be reactive. We can't throw in the towel when our government says, we're not going to do anything about it, right? Just the other day, Penny Wong had the audacity to say, what's happening in Gaza is atrocious and we condemn these actions and we call for an immediate ceasefire and we stand on that position. We stand on the position.
It took how long?
Yeah, we stand on the position of a ceasefire where, we're always standing on that position. The reality is the Australian government isn't standing on the position of a ceasefire. As much as they vote on it, they truly don't want a ceasefire, because if they did, if they had an ounce of humanity and they wanted a ceasefire, they would be putting sanctions on Israel, but they're yet to do so. They're
manufacturing parts of their F-35 jets, as far as I know.
Exactly. They have put more sanctions on politicians who speak up against the genocide than those who are committing the genocide. Fatima Payman was kicked out of the Labor Party because of that. It's disgusting, but at the same time, I'm grateful this is happening, because there's a conversation that's happening amongst the broader community, but specifically the Muslim community, on how do we vote and how do we, how do you engage in the political system? And that conversation wasn't happening
correct. Now we have Muslim vote, for instance.
Exactly. And I think the community has realized, wait, we're actually very powerful. We're not this marginalized community that everyone thinks we are. We're actually very powerful. And if we, stand up on our own 2 feet, straighten up our backs a bit, we could actually achieve a lot. And not just for the Palestinian cause, but for just the general ummah, the millions of people around the world who are being oppressed. We could actually do a lot. Yeah,
I saw that with a recent guest to Australia, Dr. Anas Al-Takriti, when he was here, and you attended the same seminars that I attended. And what he's done in Britain, for instance, with MAB and the Cordoba Foundation, the Cordoba Foundation, it's phenomenal, and it's a brilliant framework that we not shouldn't, but we must adopt here, because I think a lot of Muslims used to shy away from voting and say, it's not something that we should get involved in, etc. From fiqh issues, and now the narrative has changed. That's changed completely. Everyone is getting on board, saying, okay, we see that in order to make change at a political level, we have to have a voice at a political level. Otherwise, we don't make change, and we don't see change. People like yourself who are involved in marketing and media, now a lot of the content that you're looking at is the disgusting things that are occurring overseas. So have you managed to adopt a daily routine of resilience? Like, okay, I'm going to do my prayers, and I'm going to make dua from this time to that time. I'm going to make sure I eat at this time. I'm going to take a break from my job, which is directly involved in filtering content, like the content we're seeing. Have you got a routine at the moment?
Oh, I wouldn't say a routine. I'm not
cheese and crackers.
Yeah, I'm not.
I'm going to sponsor you with my meals.
Oh, please do.
Make
please
your life
sponsor
easier.
me with your
the
meals.
Entire office, inshallah.
Oh, that would be amazing. In terms of routine, I wouldn't say I have a particular routine when it comes to these things. I think I try. The thing is, it's not something you make time for. Right, Palestine is not something, you have to squeeze in Palestine somewhere in your schedule, or activism somewhere in your schedule. It's something that you live and you breathe every day of your life. The first thing I do, which you might hate me for, is I do go on my phone. As soon as I wake up, because I am so eager to see what's happened in the past 8 hours when I've been asleep.
If you're getting 8 hours.
Yeah. Well, I do get my 8 hours. So alhamdulillah, very, very blessed for that. But yeah, sometimes it can fall into this pit of you just doing the same thing over and over again.
It's like Groundhog Day.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's important to kind of change it up a bit, right? If you're going to a protest every week or something like that, maybe see if there's another event you can attend to. And I think this is what's really important for people in the organization space, is the community wants different takes on the Palestinian cause. They don't just want someone screaming out free Palestine. They want different takes. And I think going back to Dr. Anas, that was a very very unique take on the Palestinian cause. So I think that's the important part there. Yeah.
With the situation now being magnified with all the news that's coming from Lebanon as well, and the horrendous things that are taking place there. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease their suffering.
Ameen.
Have you noticed effect on the staff around you that work as part of your team? Have you noticed a change in demeanor and a change in their well-being, whether it be physiological, cognitive? Have you noticed that around your peers?
I don't think I've ever sat down with anyone since October and the conversation on Palestine doesn't get brought up. It's brought up in every single setting, whether it's friends, whether it's work. In October 2023, I was working for a different company, which shall not be named. And I remember I wore my kufiya to work that day. I think it was like, I think the week after October 7th, I wore my kufiya to work. And some old white bogan comes up to me. He's like, oh, what the hell is that? Like, it's a kufiya, and I try to educate him. And, I took that as an option. I was not only was I the only Muslim, I was the only person of color there as well. So I took it as an opportunity to educate and talk about Palestine whenever I can. And I think that conversation definitely did happen. I remember when Shatban was killed in that fire. I remember that day because we watched the video in the office, and just the whole day everyone's just quiet. Like, no one is in the mood to work.
Nothing has substance.
Yeah, everyone
Food
was
doesn't
just
taste.
Yeah,
Nothing.
I was just like I just watched a massacre fall right in front of my eyes, and I'm expected to answer an email now. So it can be difficult, but I think it's important to, I guess I have to be careful how I say this, because I think a lot of content that comes out of Palestine, not necessarily comes out of Palestine, but when people share Palestinian content, can be kind of defeatist in nature. It's like, oh, another attack, it's never going to end, it's so bad and blah, 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 and which is all true, don't get me wrong, it's all true. I wouldn't say that not ending part is true, that's definitely not true. But we need to see Palestine in a different light. We can't be so defeatist about it, because we know for sure, it's guaranteed that Palestine will be free. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when.
When, yeah.
That's all. So we need to remember that. We need to remember that the end goal is something that we will reach, right? It's not this strange, idea. It's so far-fetched. It's not far-fetched at all.
Yeah.
It's the truth. Palestine will be free, regardless of how you look at it. From an Islamic perspective, Palestine will be free. If you look at it from a political, humanitarian perspective, you can't continue what you're doing now.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable at all. It has to come to an end.
And it's frustrating because people think that when you're saying that the end will be, something that would be its success, inshallah. Sure. They think that you're almost looking at it through the lens of a Marvel superhero.
Very optimistic.
Movie.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the case at all. I think that they are shooting themselves in the foot with the blatant attack on United Nations bases. Even the president of France came out and said, remember that you are attacking now the same entity that created you.
Exactly.
You were created by the United Nations, and now you're attacking the United Nations. You must tread carefully. I never thought that he would come out, and he didn't really directly speak about Palestine.
Yeah.
But I don't know if these boundaries that they are crossing, because it's not the first time. I remember very clearly, and I'm old enough to remember, I think it was in 2006, and they attacked a United Nations base in Lebanon, and many Fijians, United Nations staff that were based there just to distribute food, were killed, and no one bat an eyelid. Can you imagine that was to happen in any other context? The global response would have been profound. Do you think that the lines that they're crossing now, not killing people from Palestine, not slaughtering villages filled with people in the south of Lebanon, do you think the lines that they're crossing now are going to come back and bite them in the butt, as the proverbial saying goes.
Well, look, something is going to come bite them in the butt for sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think this, to be honest, I don't think there was lines to cross. Those lines didn't exist, in my opinion. I don't think those lines ever existed to begin with.
Well, we gave notice. We told them we were going to bomb, so that's enough.
Those lines didn't exist. If those lines existed, Israel wouldn't have existed to begin with, right? This is 76 years of brutal occupation, of brutal apartheid.
Open air prison.
Exactly. It is, in every shape and form, always has been, a breach of international law. But what does that mean? What does that truly mean?
They keep saying that. They keep saying it's a breach of international law because if you are an occupying entity, and then by default you are responsible for the people that you are occupying and for the humane treatment of those people. Your existence to begin with is illegal.
Exactly.
So now not only is it that, but you are now treating these people like captives. You cannot say that you want a two-state solution when they don't drink the same water that you drink. They don't eat the same food that you eat. You don't go through the same dozens of checkpoints to go and visit your family that they go through. What equality are you talking about? It doesn't make any sense. But sorry, I was really annoyed by that because they talk about a two-state solution. Do you see that as a realistic goal?
Absolutely not. Like 1948 was the two-state solution. We've seen how well that's worked out. And I think this concept of, like, you have to be not even deluded, you have to be an idiot to genuinely believe a two-state solution is going to work. That doesn't work.
Or the voting system.
Exactly. Imagine I come into your house, I kill your wife, I kill your kids. I'm like, all right, you guys can have the living room. Let me just have the bedroom and everything else. This doesn't work out like that. It doesn't work out like that. Like, it's just, it's so silly. It's such a silly argument to make that a two-state solution is going to answer all these questions that we have and solve all these issues that we have. It's not. It didn't in 1948. It's not going to solve anything in 2024. Never will.
And it suggests a two-state solution suggests equality.
Exactly.
But that's not part of their vocabulary at the moment at all. We're seen as second-grade citizens. We're not even seen as humans. What I find really, really strange is that the entire world is being told directly by the Zionist entity that you are inferior to us, not just the Arabs, all of you. If you are not part of us, if you are not from us, you are inferior. You don't have the same rights that we do, and we are chosen. It's a very nonsensical argument. It's not even an argument if you want to put it that way. The blame game that they put on the voting system. You guys voted for Hamas. You know about the details that led up to that. The people that allegedly voted for Hamas, the majority of Palestine is youth, correct?
Yeah.
When did the vote occur? Over 2 decades.
Yeah.
Over 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
They weren't even born. The people that you are slaughtering right now were not born when that so-called pseudo vote occurred.
Exactly.
And that pseudo vote that you're talking about was still not in favor of Hamas anyway. Yet the same regime that is saying that they are after Hamas are the ones that funded them and participated in their existence to begin with. How do we educate? How are we going to educate the layman Aussie? I'm not talking about people in our community. We know through conversations, and and one thing that's come good from this situation is the awareness, especially with regards to history. If you don't know history, you're not going to understand the present, and you cannot contribute to the future. But a lot of us, including myself, didn't know about a lot of the history to do with Palestine. Do you think that embedded into the curriculum somehow, if we can go as far as saying that, will have a ripple effect later on? How do we educate how do you educate the kids? I know that you're too young. You don't have kids.
Not that I know.
How do you have these conversations with them? Have you spoken to youth? Because I know a lot of the youth look up to you. How do you speak to them about this sort of stuff without allowing them to feel that helplessness and despair?
I think it's that's a tough one. I think it starts off with how you, I guess, brand the Palestinian people, right? Do you brand them as oppressed, or do you brand them as resilient? I think that's how you should start first. That's the beginning. Branding them as resilient, as strong, as people that don't give up, as people that we look up to. And I think that's something that my siblings have been doing with their children. It's about, showing Palestinians, they're strong people. This isn't something new. This has been happening for a long time. But also making that information digestible for a kid, You're not going to talk about in 1948 there was this and this, because they're not going to understand that. In due time, explain these things. But kids, subhanAllah, are also very, very smart. They can grasp, quite complex topics very easily. And if you were, for example, to take a child and then put him into a room, place two men into a room, and one of them shoots the other, the child will know what that person did was wrong, even though if they haven't had the exposure before.
Yeah, fitra, the moral compass.
It's within your moral compass. So it's important to educate your kids. You have to. And I think some people assume that, kids are too young, they shouldn't know about this. I don't think that's right. Because unfortunately, your 10-year-old, you're assuming that your 10-year-old is too young to know about what's happening in Palestine. But there is a 10-year-old being massacred in Palestine
at the same time. Yeah, I understand exactly what you're coming from.
So they need to know. They don't need to see, and I would never recommend showing children the graphic stuff. But teach them the history, teach them what's happening. So when they do grow older, they share that information with their children. They continue to pass that torch of activism to generations to come.
It's important. It's critical that they grow up with the same enthusiasm. And, when, not if, but when this situation subsides, that motivation and that vigor doesn't die. Yeah. Doesn't die with us.
Yeah, and they learn that from the environment as well, like their parents and things like that. I've seen so many videos of kids walking in Coles and they're like, "Mom, is this boycott? Dad, is this boycott?"
Yeah.
So it's beautiful. They really learn from the environment that you put them in, and it doesn't have to be so textbook education. You just lead by example. You say, "Oh, we're not having this because this company supports, supports Israel," and they can understand that. They can grasp their mind around that quite easily.
Yeah, it's a very important issue that you bring up, which leads me to one of my final questions, which is people who are looking to do more, who are frustrated. I know I felt like that sometimes sitting at home, driving in the car. Sometimes you're enjoying something and you start to almost feel guilty. I think the record for me with going without food without realizing was close to 7 days.
Wow.
Before I got really pale and quite fatigued, and I had someone tell me, "When's the last time you ate?" But what advice would you give to the individual that wants to do more but doesn't have access to the organizations that you are aligned with, but wants to do their part?
Yeah. I guess look at what you're doing right now. I think the easiest things that people can do is share content on social media.
The bare minimum.
Yeah, bare minimum. Share content on social media, boycott, maybe attend the protests, things like this. But it's also, I think it's very important to understand your limits as a person, right? Because it goes back to that fundamental thing I keep saying. It's about being proactive and not reactive, right? So you can't put 100% of the time all the time, right? I know some people, the most that they can do is share content on social media, because like it becomes very, very overwhelming. So they just do that. But then I know some people, that's the bare minimum that that they can do. So I think understanding what your own capacities are without burning out is very important. So sharing, amplifying Palestinian voices is so, so important. Boycotting is so, so, so important, and it has a massive effect as well.
Profound impact.
You know, we've seen like over 40,000 businesses in Israel has shut down in the past year.
Wow.
40,000 businesses. The economy in Israel is gone. There's no bouncing back from that.
That would probably take 60 years as well.
Exactly. I hope it takes a lot longer.
Yeah.
So don't believe that the little that you're doing doesn't have an effect. I think that comes into shaitan, whispering in your ear, saying, "Oh, you're just attending a protest. Is that all you're doing?"
Yeah. I've heard those whispers.
Exactly. You're not drinking Coca-Cola. You think that's going to make a difference?
Yeah.
But just keep going at it. Keep going at it, and have your intentions in the right place.
Yeah.
You're doing
this.
Exactly. You're doing this for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first.
Yeah.
Right? Because at the end of the day, you're going to stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you have to say what you did and what you didn't do. When the martyrs stand in front of you, you're going to have to tell them what you did and what you didn't do.
When they ask us,
Exactly.
And we will be asked that question, what did you do?
Exactly.
To within your capacity, of course. People need to understand that this is not an issue that we have with a specific religion at all. I've got very close friends of mine that are from the Jewish faith, and they are as horrified as we are about what's going on. So that's very, very important to have those conversations as well. Yeah. It's not that we want to see harm come to the Jewish peoples. That's not what we're pushing for. We're pushing for the barbaric Zionist entity that is very different to the Hasidic Orthodox Jews and what they stand for. They're a different kettle of fish. One thing that was promising, and you were involved directly with Before 1770, a beautiful documentary, and I'm not changing the page here. This is relevant because seeing, when we were at the premiere for that, seeing the reaction of people from such a diverse group of backgrounds come together for the same reasons, differences of opinion, but agreeing universally on this one issue, which is that the Aboriginal peoples had a relationship with the Macassans from Indonesia, and they traded with them and they intermarried and things like that. Seeing the response in the crowd, in the audience, to that information that is not mainstream, that is not in the history books, in the school curriculum, seeing their response to that and their curiosity and their passion, I felt a sense of optimism that reminded me, or it woke me up, and I thought to myself, I felt hopeful for the first time in a long time, that if people of different faiths, different religions got together to acknowledge the Aboriginal peoples for all the good that they did prior, and they were painted in this barbaric picture as well, that maybe, just maybe, we can change the hearts and the opinions of people of all faiths and all religions to this Palestinian issue.
Yeah, that's happening already. Like, we've seen that. Like, I remember the first Palestinian protest I attended was, I think, 2005. So like 20 years ago.
Wow.
And it was like,
how old were you?
I was 5 back then. I had my little poster.
I think I was in my 3rd year of uni when you were born.
Well, and I remember like 99% of the crowd are Muslim or Arab, and you would be shocked if you saw.
That was back then,
a blonde-haired woman, and I remember seeing a lady with blonde hair. I was like, whoa, like she's fighting for us. Like, that's so insane. Yeah. But now you go to a Palestinian protest, 60,000 people, all walks of life, all ages.
Yep. And the Muslims are the minority.
Exactly. And people have realized, like, the world has woken up. It's unfortunate it's taken this long, but I'm glad that the world has woken up.
Better late than never.
Exactly.
Imam Ali radiallahu anhu karamallahu wajhu, he said, قدر الجماعة خير من صفوة الفرقة. A group with its impurities, with differences of opinion, is better, united, is better than sectarianism with its purity. It's better to have people of the same, with the same goal, the same vision, which is to stand for what is right. Even though their political stances might be different, their religious beliefs might be different, standing together for the same cause, rather than each individual standing in the corner or sitting in a different place with their hand up saying, no, I'm correct and he's wrong. So that has changed. And that's the positive that has come. Even in Lebanon, you've got the people in the north of Lebanon that are opening up their homes to people in the south. I know personally, I know an individual who's like an uncle to me. He has 30 people from the south of Lebanon living in his home.
Wow.
30. And the rest of his property is surrounded with tents because of the hundreds of thousands that have now been displaced. So that, that's something that shows you that, subhanAllah, the humanity is still there. We haven't completely lost humanity. Allah barik feek, jazakallah khairan for joining me, Abu Bakr. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.
Keep up the fantastic and great work that you are doing.
Inshallah.
There's a Palestine conference coming up
This Saturday,
inshallah. I look forward to it. I encourage everybody to be there and continue flying that flag. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant them ease from their suffering. And I look forward to seeing you again. Jazakallah khairan. Just very briefly before we finish, we have to finish off with at least a dua for these people. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم افتح علينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. اللهم انصر المستضعفين في غزة وفي الصين وفي السودان وفي اليمن وفي لبنان وفي كل مكان. اللهم فرج قلوبهم واحفظ أطفالهم ونساءهم وشيوخهم وجنودهم يا أكرم الأكرمين. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله وصلي وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. جزاك الله خيرا. السلام عليكم.